Hello, good evening and welcome back. So, coronavirus update, 13-year-old boy dies, says London Hospital Trust. Oh my god, that means it's not just affecting the over 75s, even though I think it's only like one under 30 that's died from it. And even now, it's like, well, actually, has he died from the coronavirus? Sure, apparently he's been tested positive for coronavirus, but the coroner report isn't through yet, so perhaps he hasn't died, but he had no underlying health conditions. And as we see here, Ismail Mohamed Abdulwahab from Brixton in South London. Oh, hang on a moment. Is he from that particular ethnic group of which they have very high inbreeding rates and cousin marriages, and therefore there are always genetic problems caused through their inbreeding because that's their cultural practice from their backwards religion? Is that the case? Oh yes it is. Is that also the same religion which apparently says that everything Muhammad says is true because it's the word of Allah, except of course for the times when he then backtracks and says, oh no, you know when I told you that thing was true? Yeah, it's not true because I was taken in by the devil. But now what I'm saying is true, and you can definitely believe me, so do what I tell you now, until I tell you it is said by the devil. Which is why we say that any contradictions in the Quran, that what is said later is true, and not the things earlier, because the things earlier were said by the devil, and definitely not the things later, because he was definitely a prophet of God, of Allah. Don't you know? Yes, of course. And he also said, of course, that if you travel to Mecca, then any of your ailments and illnesses will be cured, which is why clearly so many people are flocking to Mecca, and the governments are loving it and saying, yes, anyone under Islam, you should really continue your pilgrimage to get to Mecca. Except, no, they haven't done that at all, have they? No, not at all. In fact, Mecca is just a ghost town, so it seems as if even Muslims and Islamists don't believe everything Muhammad says, in which case, hey, if we're cherry picking, then what the fuck does Islam mean to you at all? Is it actually useless? And you're just picking that for a protected characteristic, and you're just doing it to suit yourself, and you're not actually religious at all, but you're just choosing the things that work for you, and you're not actually taking the religion seriously, and you're just doing what is expedient instead of what is dictated to you by the word of God, apparently. It does seem that way, doesn't it? Also, given that an angel does not enter into a home where there is a picture or a dog, think of how many Muslims you know which have a picture or a dog. Obviously, it explains why they're not so fan of dogs, but any pictures in their homes, that means that the angel will not enter onto their home. Do they really not want angels in their homes, or are they just cherry picking yet again? In which case, what do they mean by saying Muslim? It just means they believe in Yahweh then, I guess, because it can't mean they believe in Muhammad, because they're going against what he's saying and what the angels are telling him to say, and Allah is telling him to say as well, so they don't believe what Muhammad says. That's interesting, isn't it? But nonetheless, they seem to just do what they think is right and use any excuse they can to give them a reason in order to do what they want to do with life. And that is why we see so many problems, genetic problems, with the Islamic culture within England and the inbreeding. And that's why there are so many special needs children from an Islamic background, because of the inbreeding that we understand is detrimental. And of course, similar problem for the Russian Tsars in centuries gone by. It's not just a Islamist thing in centuries gone by, but it is now, because they haven't decided to keep up with the times, because of course, as Muhammad said, any new technology that's against Islam. You can't have any new technology, you can't do anything new that Muhammad didn't do, which includes writing the Quran itself. But apparently that was then okay, because they then had to think afterwards, okay, so there's good new technology and there's bad new technology, because clearly good new technology is like mobile phones and medicine and the like, but bad new technology is maths. I kid you not. That's why they say maths is the work of the devil, and people are stoned to death for studying it. But yes, all cultures are equal. Oh yeah. So with this culture in mind, with this so-called prophet leading the charge, I do not believe you, BBC, at all, seeing as you are just a Islam apologist at this point, suggesting that Ismail Mohamed Abdulwahab from Brixton in South London didn't have any underlying health conditions. And they even say a spokesman for the trust said the boy's death had been referred to the coroner, but gave no further details. Yep, so in that case, you don't know what he died from yet, but you're attributing that to the coronavirus, which again is still on par to influenza. I do understand the other side, like Stefan Molyneux says, of course, that it seems to be a bioweapon, seeing as it is very similar to HIV, and they were colluding with Canadians, of course, beforehand in order to try and create something that was more deadly. So it's either that China willingly infects the rest of the world, and some, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, says it doesn't affect Chinese citizens as much as it does Caucasians. We're going to have a comeback in like 10, 20 years or so in order to really whip around the world. So either they are maliciously murdering millions of people, or they were just creating something, which of course they shouldn't be. It goes against the Geneva Convention and anyone with any sense of morality. And then they just let it loose, and then did nothing about it, in which case that's manslaughter. So either way, the CCP reacted terribly. That's no news to anybody. The CCP not valuing human life and silencing any dissident, that's not really news. But nonetheless, of course, everybody wishes to cover up for them, as we've seen from the World Health Organization recently. When asked about Taiwan, it's like, oh, I didn't quite hear that question. So, okay, I'll ask again. No, let's move on to another one. No, I'm going to ask this again. Oh, you've disconnected. You're back. Let's ask you about Taiwan again. So we've already spoken about China. So yes, and you might have noticed I used the word Taiwan and not Chinese Taipei. I do not acknowledge that Taiwan is part of China. In fact, if you will, then Taiwan is actually still the root of China, because it wasn't taken over by communism, by Mao Zedong, when he slaughtered about 72 million people. You could say it's 24 million, somewhere in that region of dozens of millions of people. But when you get past a few thousand, maybe tens of thousands, at the upper limit, you think, does it really matter? If your ideology has caused that many deaths and you haven't thought, maybe I'm doing something wrong, and instead have persevered, easily once you get to 24 million, you go, nah, I think there's something really wrong with this ideology that is causing so much death. But lol no, because cheap phones don't, I guess. But hey, at least this way then we can hopefully get our manufacturing back to our own country. So, of course, the problem with that, as has always been, is government regulations. Like, yes, we're going to put a load of red tape, which, as we've seen recently by Rishi Sunak saying, regulations are going to be limited so we can get our gloves and our PPE, our protective equipment, to us sooner, because we don't need that many regulations in order to keep us safe, but we've got them anyway. So what, you're just protecting the bigger companies because you don't want smaller ones to be able to compete? You don't want the customer to be able to have a better experience? You don't want people to be able to innovate and be entrepreneurial in order to create a better solution at a lower price and help out more people? Great, so you're just corrupt. Brilliant. And in doing that, then people think, okay, well then the way around this is to go to China. And this is where the government grows, because instead of saying, oh, we've made a mistake, let's regroup and think about what we've done, instead of that, they go, no, let's go more in and say, now we're going to put restrictions on foreign trade as well. Instead of thinking, we've made a mistake, they just grow. And this is why government only grows and it never shrinks. So, as they've said here, according to BBC Health correspondent Nick Triggle, said it was rare for teenagers to become seriously ill after being infected with coronavirus. Just 0.3% of those who show symptoms require hospital care, and 0.006% die. In other words, 2 out of every 30,000 infections among this age group will not survive, he said. And, of course, when it comes to these numbers, we don't really know where they're getting them from. If we go to the cruise ship princess, the Diamond Princess, I think, where they had about 300 people on and had a death rate of about 3%, but it was again just for the OAPs, as most cruise ships are full of. It's the golden years where people go to die. That's why they have morgues on the cruise ships, because they know the old people will die at sea. Where we know everybody got affected, infected. This is basically the perfect sample. Again, it's 3% fatality, and if it's the non-OAPs, it's negligible. It's comparable to flu, basically, influenza. Yep. I mean, it's just the same script that we've seen for H1N1, for the coronavirus. And yet, for whatever reason, they've decided, no, we're going to be more serious about this one. And I don't see why. But nonetheless, hey, it's government intervention. And what I find particularly pertinent about this is their conclusion, where they're saying with Michael Gove. So to quote, meanwhile, Cabinet Officer Minister Michael Gove described the latest rise in UK deaths as deeply shocking during the government's daily briefing, rising to nearly 400 in a day. Now is absolutely not the time for people to imagine there can be any relaxation or slackening of lockdown measures, he said. Yes, this so-called conservative government that wishes to protect people's freedoms is saying, nah, we're going to maintain the limitations and make it difficult for your life, and of course put the economy on hold and not allow these individual freedoms. We're not going to suggest that we're going to just tell the older people to quarantine themselves and keep themselves safe, and basically anybody who doesn't want to work, then obviously don't, and any employer that is understanding will of course make exceptions for you, and you'll be allowed to work from home where possible and only work where you can, as I've mentioned before. And it would be that straightforward. If you don't want to work, don't work. Explain to your employer. If you can work from home, work from home. If you're retirement age, don't go outside. If you don't want to get infected, wait for herd immunity. It is really that simple. We have a small enough old population, about 2.5% of the at risk. Therefore, herd immunity will easily cover them. So give them a few months, take care of the old people in your communities, in your families, and we'll easily get through this without much of a problem. The young people, sure, you might be ill for a week, as in you can't really work properly for up to a week, and then you'll have the delayed effects for up to a month, so just a couple of weeks after that really, but you will be able to work from then, and you'll be fine. Does this warrant shutting down the entire economy? No. Does pretty much any government, because power corrupts, seek to get more power and then not relinquish that after the threat is gone, like the Patriot Act after 9/11 in America? Yes, of course it does. Is that what we're seeing now? Yes, of course. Am I concerned the government is going to try and keep these restrictions in? Because, hey, if it worked during this time, then why can't it work during peacetime? So, well, for a start, it would have worked better if it wasn't for you, seeing as you're now having to use private companies in order to give you the supplies that you need. And secondly, well, no. These are special circumstances. Even if your input was required, it still isn't needed for day-to-day life. So leave us alone, please. And stop with your regulations to stop other companies coming in. Stop with your bailouts, so that not only are you making it difficult for people to compete, but you're also making it impossible for bigger businesses to fail because you keep bailing them out. How about having an even playing field for everybody? Everybody understands the risks. We all know what's going to happen. That's why other countries which were affected more by SARS almost 20 years ago now have taken precautions, and we haven't because we weren't as affected. So that any company that wishes to be to precautionary can do that. And it is really that straightforward. Allow people the choice. Stop trying to encourage people to spend money they don't have, and let's actually try and have a more cohesive community where we save what we earn and we don't have to worry so much about inflation in order to live on fiat currency. Simple as that. So hey, with all that in mind, I would say save your money, but probably won't be worth much soon. So plan your investments wisely. Take care of the people you love. There are many good opportunities like Deliveroo, of course, which any delivery companies are still hiring in order to keep up with the demand. So you can easily work from them or work from home if you can, if it's a more skilled job, whatever it might be. Do what you can, and most of all, until next time, have a good one.